us as a company, we are sitting with a couple of sites, a couple of data centers. We have a variety of data and assets that we want to protect. We've got users working remotely. We have users bringing their own devices. This can also be contractors coming on site and using their own machines. Our remote workers are having to VPN into our perimeter in order to access sensitive information and restricted resources, on-premise resources, etc. But they're mainly working from home, especially during the lockdown. They are sitting on their home network. They are using their own Wi-Fi. They've got flatmates, maybe other people in the house, and they're in an unsecure location. Now, remote working is nothing new. There's always been remote workers when it comes to, especially in the sales industry, people going to airports, hotels, etc. But now it's such a major issue for people because of the pandemic and what happened. So how are we going to quickly get these people protected? If you look at the screen at the moment, when we see them VPNing into the company, there's one major thing about this, and it's that the security appliances are sitting on the network edge. And the only way that they can be protected while online is if their traffic passes through those security appliances. So when they're on the VPN, the traffic comes into the network and goes back out the way through the security appliances, and then they'll find that maybe some websites are blocked or there's some threat protection enabled and so on. But the minute that they drop off of that VPN, they can probably go where they want. And I used to have that with a previous employer. I found that whenever I was on the VPN, I couldn't access. I would be Googling, finding strange forums where there might be a solution to a problem and so on. Once I was on that VPN, those forums wouldn't work. Once I was off the VPN, they would. And I was very rarely on the company VPN. The only times that I would really go on to it, because I was always sent out to client sites or I would work from home about 90% of the time, I would only go on it to fill in timesheets, maybe go in to deal with an HR issue, something like that. I would very rarely ever be on that VPN. So was I ever protected when I was using the internet? And that is a major issue at the moment. And it's all down to this design of having to come back into the company premises to go back out via these devices. On our next slide, we can see as things have changed, we've got these four walls around like our network perimeter, but we also have these cloud resources. We've got these cloud providers here of AWS, we've got Google Cloud, Azure, and then we've got this massive amount of cloud apps that people can access. They can be accessing them from their phone, they can be accessing them from laptops, desktops. These cloud apps are essentially ways into your business or threats to your business. I say that because when it comes to SASE, think of SASE as dismantling this four walls mentality and understanding every single attack vector for your company. So when you're dealing with a cloud app, how risky is it for a user to be using it? What does it actually allow the user to do? Are they signing up to it using their company credentials? Are they uploading files to these apps and losing control of that file? Have they read the terms and conditions of those cloud apps? What happens to that data once it's uploaded? Do they have any control to be able to delete it, or is it on a timer? What does that allow them to do when it comes to pasting information into chat rooms? Can they paste passwords and so on? The cloud apps are one of the main attack vectors for companies, particularly when it comes to phishing. If you're using Office 365, for example, you'll no doubt get phishing attempts of people sending you fake login screens for these cloud apps. Now, the cloud apps tend to also have a public-facing login portal that can be accessed from anywhere, and most of them are very helpful in that if I know your domain, if I know an email address of someone in your company, and I test it in Office 365, I'll probably be taken to your sign-in page, the one that's specific for your company, because Office 365 picks up the domain that's being used, and it will say, we're now taking you to your organization sign-in page, and there you go, a public-facing cloud portal that anyone can log into. So how do you protect that? So these are the layers that you have to go into when you're looking at SASE, is all of these attack vectors, all of these things that are opened up for people in your company to use that can be exploited, and how to limit the access to them, how to stop people either registering for them, logging into them, and once they're logged in, giving them least permissions. And the main thing that I focus on initially is visibility, and is understanding exactly what your users are doing with these cloud apps. What are they going to from their work machine? What are the activities that they're up to in there? And as we move forward, we can see that Netskope, as a next-gen secure web gateway, it brings a lot of solutions under the hood. So Netskope as a whole has many different functions to it. We've got the CASB, which is going to be your cloud access service broker. We've got your secure web gateway. We've got DLP. We've got threat protection. We've got what they call private access, which is essentially replacing a VPN and giving a zero trust network access type environment to your users. All of these things under one hood, and that's only a small part of it. But we'll go through it. How would you roll Netskope out? If you had to protect your users at working from home, what can you do with Netskope, and how quickly can you get that protection to your users? So Netskope is a cloud tenant. This is the cloud tenant that we have for our lab. It is a public-facing cloud portal. So you go to a website, you log into it with an admin account for Netskope, but you can put controls onto that portal. You could make it where only certain people from certain addresses can log into the Netskope tenant. I tend not to do that because a cloud portal, the user could be anywhere. To limit IPs, if someone's IP at home changed, they now can't get into Netskope. They would have to now be on the company network to get to Netskope, which I'm not a big fan of, that hairpinning in and out to get to a tool like this. But you can put on controls such as conditional access and MFA, etc., to secure that user a bit more and fully verify who they are. I'm logged in at the moment. It's a very intuitive interface once you're logged into it. This is what I call the front end. So this is where you do all your configuration of policies and setting up your DLP, your threat protection, and so on. And we also have the back end, which is accessed via hitting settings here. And this is the back end configuration of the tenant itself. So you've got the front end for your web traffic, and the back end is administration of your tenant. The way that it's used is, I guess there's a couple of criteria that you want to look at when it comes to rolling out a tool like this. The first is you have to get the traffic to the cloud tenant. If we go back to our diagram here, remember that the user had to come in over a VPN to get to the security appliances. Well, because this is a cloud tenant, you have to get the traffic to the cloud tenant. So our address here is somerford.eu.goscope.com. We use it inside of Somerford Associates, where we have a cloud tenant sitting for our production element. And you can see here that we have an IP address. And as long as I can hit that IP address, then my traffic would be inspected. There are a range of IPs for this globally. It's not just a single IP, obviously, that you're given. There are various points of presence out there in the world. So with that, it comes with its own failover. So if I have an issue reaching one POP, it'll automatically send me to another POP. So you've instantly got that failover. You're not dependent on a single point of failure when it comes to reaching a cloud tenant. So my traffic has to get to that cloud tenant. How does it get there? Well, you can see I've got a client here installed on this machine. And all that client is doing is based upon settings inside of here called steering configurations. It's deciding what to send up to my cloud tenant. So I've got it configured that all web traffic, every single bit of web traffic on my machine is to be sent to the cloud tenant. And you can make this granular. You can set up exceptions. There are some exceptions come out of the box. So local IP addresses are not going to be sent to the tenant. So if you're on premise and accessing an application that is fully on premise, it's not going to send that to the tenant to then come back to on premise. It's not going to do that. It's just going to send you straight to the application because it's inside those four walls. You can bypass like streaming, finance, etc. You can bypass applications that are certificate pinned where they're actually an installed application, because they tend to have a hard-coded certificate, and Netskope getting in the way of it might cause issues. So you can bypass things like that. You'll notice that all of these are blocked though. So by default, we've got them all blocked. so that we would have to enable them. A user should be installing, for example, the Dropbox app on their machine. So if they did, then it would be blocked. They would have to go to the browser, and because it's web traffic, then any relevant policies for Dropbox would be applied. But you can set up these exceptions at the point. So as we look at the client, all it's doing, essentially looking at all the traffic on my machine and going, is this web traffic? If so, send it to the tenant. Get it sent up there, get it inspected, get the policies applied to it. So how do we get the tenant rolled out? Well, we have to look at who are our users. Who is it that actually needs a client? We have a variety of ways that we can send user information up to Netskope. If I come into users here, I can create one manually. So I could upload a CSV. We need an email address, so it works off of an email address, identifies the user. We can add more information to the user, such as their name and so on, but it mainly wants an email address to identify a user. I can do that CSV, just take a whole CSV of users, put it into here, upload it, my users will now appear. Or I can populate them from Active Directory or an IDP, such as Okta. I'm doing both here. You'll see here in my groups, I've got Netskope users is coming from Okta. If I quickly jump into Okta, then we can see I've got a Netskope user enrollment app is installed. It took about 5 minutes to configure this and push out users to it. I just create a group in Okta. I can take existing groups, or I could create a new group. I add users in Okta to that group, and then I push it out to the tenant. With a little bit of config, such as a token and a URL for where the cloud tenant is, and I just push the group out, and it now appears in here, and the users from that group are now populated in here. Anything with workshop.somerford.co is coming from Okta. The other side is that I can do it from Active Directory. Now, in order to do it from Active Directory, you need a little application called a directory importer. And that directory importer is installed anywhere that you wish on a Windows box inside of your estate, as long as it can read the domain information. So I've got it sitting at the moment on a domain controller. On premise, you probably wouldn't install it on a domain controller, but you can have it on any other Windows machine. You could have it on your own machine if you want to. It just has to read that information, and it will periodically send any changes up to the tenant. You configure it where it could look at your entire domain. I wouldn't recommend doing that because it's going to pull in every single user, every single group. But you create a system. So I tend to push for create a new Netskope OU, create new Netskope groups, keep it all nice and clean, create your business divisions as a separate group, think of what policies you're going to need, who's going to need segregated. Maybe you've got a banking team, there's 2 divisions of that banking team, maybe a fraud team need their own policies, things like that. You just need to work it out as to who's going to need it. But at its most base, you want to have at least one group of users, point the directory importer at that group and say, send all users in this group to Netskope. And what it will do is it will come here and it will populate them in. Now, with using Active Directory, with using Okta, they're going to have a client installed as well and authenticate to that client. I'm going to jump into AWS at the moment. Need to change my screen share. There we go. So on this machine, on this AWS machine, we've got a Windows box sitting, a Windows server that I'm using. I have a little tool here just to emulate what you can do on-prem. So this is a MSI exec bat file. And if we walk through it, all it's going to do is it's going to install the client MSI. Anyone can download the Netskope client. They would need admin rights to install it, but anyone can download it. There's a link that you can use in your cloud tenant that would allow a user to download it for Mac, for Windows, etc. And then using these parameters, I've got a token here, I've got the address I need for my tenant, and then we have this per user config mode. Per user config, think of it as I can send an email out to a user with an invite for the client. It will download the client onto the machine and it hard codes that client to that user. So anyone who logs onto that machine is hard coded to that client. If I was to log in as user 1, and user 1 is the one that did the install and got the invite, even if I log in as user 2, it will still show up as user 1 on the client. So when you send that invite email, it's hard-coded to a single user, and anyone that uses that machine is going to be classed as whoever installed it. If you use this per user config mode, particularly for the Active Directory install, then it's going to look at the UPN of the user that's currently logged in. So if user 1 logs in, the traffic will now be badged, the client will now be owned by user 1. If user 2 logs in, the client will now be owned by user 2, providing that they've both got accounts in Netskope that they've been pushed up via the Active Directory importer. Then it doesn't matter who logs into that machine, the information will be badged correctly. The same with Okta. Okta uses authentication, where you will be given an authentication prompt when you do the install, and it will badge that client to whoever's installed. But the next person that logs in will also be asked to authenticate, and therefore that traffic is now for them. And in Okta, you can make rules around how often should they authenticate, how often should they re-authenticate if any policies are breached, etc. But it's giving you that freedom that you don't have to have just single machine, single user, etc. As long as you've got this per user config option enabled and you're doing this Windows install. So as we push that out, again, if a user wants to install it themselves, then they have to be a full admin. Or you can push it out via group policy, you can push it out via this MSI exec, SCCM, you could use like Apple, I think it's AirWatch and so on. You can push this out a variety of ways to get it to machines and then have your users use it. So if we jump back, we're thinking we've got our users and our groups worked out coming from maybe AD or Okta or any IDP that's compatible with Netskope. We've now got our client rolled out and it's pushed out to our users. So what is it we want to do first? Most companies, particularly those of a particular size, will have a secure web gateway. So if we jump back to my Chrome, most companies will have a secure web gateway. So one of these security appliances here is likely a secure web gateway. A secure web gateway at its heart is going to give you blocking of web pages, usually based upon category, exceptions to those rules, and some level of threat protection. Those are the three things you tend to use a secure web gateway for. The visibility in a secure web gateway isn't that great. You would tend to see probably a list of source, that will be the user or the address that they're at, destination, the site, address that they tried to access, and then the action. Was it blocked? Were they allowed? You tend to only see that. If you had a website such as, let's pick a random one like Dropbox, and you didn't want your users to use Dropbox anymore, you would create a blocked rule for Dropbox. So you would have to know all of the URLs and IPs, any kind of address that relates to Dropbox that a user could use in order to access the site. And you would create a rule to say, if any user goes to these addresses, then block them. The user then opens up their browser, they go to one of those addresses, and they'll get a message, and it will say something like, this site is blocked, check the IT security policy, you're not allowed to go here. Categories are done, there's a variety of ways that categories can be created. There's some think tanks come up with categories. Mumsnet was one that used to do kind of harmful content online. There may be some input from security companies, some input from users of a system might determine categories feeding back to a security tool. Categories are gambling. Anything classed as gambling goes into the category. So there'll be Ladbrokes, William Hill, 888.com. They'll all be classed as gambling. They're known to be gambling, and therefore you block gambling. Anything that is classed as gambling is going to be blocked. So the secure web gateway, most companies have them, and Netskope, at its most basic, is a secure web gateway. So we've got in here, we have web. I'm just going to refresh this page. We've got custom categories, we've got URL lists, and we've got policies. So if I was to create a policy, it's really easy to create a policy inside of Netskope. You can do it per user, you can do it per group. I could pick an entire group here to apply a policy to. That's what I'm talking about your separate business divisions. You can do it based upon the groups that you've populated. You can do it by single user. If I pick a single user here, then we can see a whole range of categories that we could choose. So most companies are going to block like adult content, aggressive, gambling, drugs. They're going to block those harmful topics from a company web usage. But inside of our web, we can create custom categories. We can group categories together to make a blanket policy with various link categories, and we can also create exceptions. So I've got 2 allowed exceptions here. If I go into my gambling exception, we can see that William Hill is allowed, whereas if we go into our custom categories, all gambling is going to have action taken on it, but our William Hill one is not. So if I create an allowed policy for this, then all gambling will be allowed, and this will be blocked. If I create a block policy, then all gambling will be blocked, but this will be allowed. We've got include and exclude as to what you want to do with that to make it a bit more granular. But at its heart, you're going to block content based upon category and then create an exception if you want to. If I now show that as the demo, because AWS is back. So if I go to Ladbrokes, I'm blocked. And these messages, as I was saying previously, all of these are customizable. So you want to be informing your users, you want to tell them why it's blocked, you don't want them to try and get round the block, you want to tell them exactly why this action has been taken, give them the opportunity to come back to you and tell you whether they think it's wrong. Maybe there's a company website that's uncategorized so far, so therefore it's getting blocked by a security policy and they need it to be categorized, and you can take action. But we're telling the user, we're informing the user here that this is not allowed. And if I hit OK on it, we have an extra step, which is where it's going to take you automatically to what is allowed. So because William Hill is allowed, I've configured this that if anyone tries to go to a gambling site, it's going to be blocked, except for William Hill. And if they try to go to Ladbrokes, it will send them to William Hill. And just to show here, we have the client installed on this machine to this particular user as well. So if I close that down, that is a web gateway in a nutshell. It is just blocking websites. You're either blocked or allowed. They tend not to have the ability to go into granular usage of a website. It's either a block or an allow. So if you had, say, YouTube, you could block YouTube, but there might be a channel on there, the company channel. So you've blocked YouTube for all your staff. They shouldn't be watching YouTube during working hours, but then there's a company channel that is used for marketing. You now need to allow an exception for that company channel, but all of YouTube is blocked. And it becomes an issue with that. Whereas with Netskope as a next-gen secure web gateway, with its cloud inline CASB type technology, we can begin to look at activities. So we're no longer just blocking the website outright, we're actually looking at activities. But we'll move on to that in a moment. The next thing of your standard web gateway is threat protection. So if I go to Google Drive here, you can see I've got some malware sitting in Google Drive. I can upload or I can download malware. I'm just going to try and upload malware here. And you can see in the bottom right here, the malware has been detected by the cloud tenant and it has blocked it. It's not allowing me to upload malware to this company Google Drive account. So what it's doing, remember, is behind the scenes, it is sending all the traffic up to that cloud tenant. So this client detects that I'm using the web right now. I'm trying to send a file over the web, trying to send it into Google Drive, but it's sending all my traffic to this tenant. And the tenant inspected that file, saw that it was malware, and stopped it from being uploaded. If I try and download malware, in fact, we won't do it from Google Drive. Let's go and get some proper malware. So if we go to iCar, iCar is a security company. They've got malware test files that you can download straight from their page. I'll make this a bit bigger. And just down on the right here, we can download a malware file. And you can see instantly it's detected and it's blocked. So we're no longer relying on antivirus running on my machine to block this malware, to catch it once it's on my machine and now at rest. It's capturing it in flight. Now, most secure web gateways have got some level of threat protection, but again, you have to go into the company and through the appliance to get that threat protection. You're not going to be protected unless you've got a connection to those appliances. But because we're using a cloud tenant, it doesn't matter where I am in the world, I'm getting this protection because the client is able to reach my cloud tenant, tell it what I'm trying to do, and it's inspecting my traffic as we go. So we've rolled out, going back to our use case, the overall point of this webinar, we've got our users, we've populated them very quickly using some kind of directory import, either from Okta or from Active Directory. We've pushed out our clients via some automated feature, SCCM, something like that. We've pushed out our clients to our users. They now have the client installed. We can take all of our existing secure web gateway policies and we can quickly import them into Netskope. So we can use the REST API to create the URL lists and so on, that at this point, our users are no different than where they were. So all of the policies that our old secure web gateway would have given the user now exist in Netskope. We're just getting that protection while they're not connected to the VPN. We've got that protection all the time now. Now, there are various things that you can do. You can make it that a user cannot turn this client off. You can hide the client from them, etc., to stop them mucking about with their admins. You can do a variety of things with this client to secure it. But as long as that client is on their machine and their machine can reach the cloud tenant, their traffic will be protected. And we've got those category-based filtering on our web usage. We've got our block lists, we've got our allow lists, created a couple of policies to represent what our secure web gateway used to do. We're now where we were, and it's relatively easy to roll that out. But where do we want to go next? Well, with the nature of the internet now, the language has changed. So a secure web gateway would only ever block or allow, it couldn't inspect what a user was doing on a website. And we need to know what our users are up to. Well, in Netskope, the visibility that we're going to get once the client is on the user's machine is second to none. So I can go into here and I can look at applications. I can see every single application that's been detected. So these are all the ones that I've used as part of my workshops and webinars and so on. You see Dropbox, Google Drive. We can see the users that are using them. We can see the number of sessions, the bytes uploaded, bytes downloaded, to see like which are heavy used applications. From the website of things, we can see the sites that people are visiting. We can get an idea of all of our users and what they're up to and see them granularly, like what a user actually does. We can see events, so we can actually see the actions that a user has taken on a website. So you can see that I've been uploading, I've been viewing, I've been logging in, or at least attempting to log in, deleting. You wouldn't get that in a secure web gateway. Secure web gateways, again, they're just going to show that you visited the site and whether you're allowed or blocked. This is going to show you exactly what users were up to on those sites. We get page events. It's the same as the website of things, like what are users loading when they go to websites, like what is the actual like back end type information that we need, maybe for troubleshooting and so on. We can go in and see detailed information as to where they're coming from, where they're going, etc. We have network events, which I'm going to skip over for now because we're going to come back to it when it makes more sense. But we also have alerts. If we have created policies, such as with our malware here, so our iCar one, I triggered the block policy on that, and it's going to tell me about it. It's going to warn me. It's going to give me an alert to say that I tried to do that. So you can see that I tried to do the malware. It's giving me that as an alert. Those alerts can be pushed out into a tool like Splunk, form part of a SOC. They could be reported on in that way, reported on from inside of Netskope. If we come back to our main screen here and go into incidents, we can begin to see this information all broken down. More granular reporting is going on over what type of malware was it. If we click on it, we can see exactly who's affected by it, who's accessed the same file. And if I click on malware here, it actually tells you what would this malware have done. So if Netskope is aware of what the damage the malware would have done, like what behavior it would take, it would show up here. And it would show me if the user clicked on this Word file, it would have installed X, Y, and Z on the machine, created this service, etc., and even give you some resolution steps if someone was infected by it. It's taken a moment to load for this malware file. But on the back end, we've now got this full visibility of what our users are up to, the type of traffic that they're generating, the activities that they're doing on site. So I'm just going to come out of this just now. And we'll go into the CCI here. This is the Cloud Confidence Index. I think my internet's completely down today between my AWS and this. But the Cloud Confidence Index is what are the applications that the users are accessing. So we saw Dropbox. I do a search for Dropbox. And Netskope have done all the homework on it to tell me exactly what this application is. They give their own proprietary score. The proprietary score is based upon how safe is it, and what can you do with the application. Is there any kind of threat protection or checking that the application does? What activities can you do on that application? They give you a breakdown of cost of that application. So maybe if your company is using a variety of cloud storage tools, you could come in here and you could compare them. They split out the GDPR readiness, like what kind of data controls are in there. What are the types of apps in your estate that are like it as well? Some information about the company, but one of the main things about it is the legal section. Because most users, when they go to a website, and I'm guilty of this as well, they'll click on terms and conditions, and then they'll just instantly accept them. They won't read about it. But when you come into this side of things, when you're looking at the legal side and the back-end information that Netskope have got about applications, one of the main things you want to be looking at in here is what happens to your data? Who owns the content when it's uploaded? So with this particular application, the customer owns the data. But with some websites out there and some apps, it's the company that you've just uploaded it to owns the data. So if you had something confidential, maybe you had a proposal or an idea or something that was valuable to your company, and one of your users just uploaded it to a company. Say if WeTransfer, for example, there's a chance that WeTransfer now own that data. They've got it, they can do what they want with it, they can sell it, they can publish it, they can do whatever they want with it because you accepted those terms and conditions and they own that data. So it's one of the most important things to look at when you're allowing cloud storage is that particular question: who owns it and what control do you have once it's uploaded? But in here, in this CCI, we've got 41,177 apps that Netskope have performed some kind of analysis of. There are some that are under research. So there's about 9,000 of them are under research where you won't get a lot of info in them, but the rest of them have been researched and scored. And you can begin to look at, well, what's risky out there? What should our users be using? I would always aim towards the green. You want your users using green apps. Try and avoid anything yellow and below. So if you were to go back to here and look at the applications, you can begin to work out what's safe, what's not, what do you want to block. Now, when it comes to rolling out further blocks, so we've taken, remember, we've rolled out a client, we've got our users, they're not experiencing any difference because the secure web gateway settings have been ported over into Netskope. So their usage of the internet, nothing has really changed. But as you begin to roll out policies, you're obviously going to impact them. You're going to change the behavior of what they do online. So a site that they could visit today is going to be blocked tomorrow if you start rolling this out. So what you start doing is you take this visibility, go into all of the applications that are showing up. Maybe there's only one user out there that's using Google Play, just as an example. So one user's using Google Play. So therefore, is it going to be a big deal to block it just for that one user? Well, maybe we don't want to block it straight away. When we look at our policies here, we can put on a user alert. So the user alert is not a block. It's an information. It's an information pane. It's confirmation that you're looking for from the user that they're fully aware of what they're doing. We can show this. So here I am in Google Drive. I have a user alert set up for GDPR information. And you can see here in my prompt, I'm not blocking, so I'm just warning the user there's some GDPR content in here. Should you be doing this, should you be uploading this to this particular application, maybe give them a link to the IT security documentation that they can read and see if they should be doing what they're doing. But we're giving them the option to proceed. So we're not out and out blocking it yet, but we're just warning them, giving them a second chance to maybe stop what they're doing. If we hit proceed, we can now upload the file. The file gets uploaded. And we could do that for downloads as well. We could say, are you sure you should be downloading this sensitive confidential file? Yes or no? And give them, oh, maybe they shouldn't be doing that. Maybe they should think again. We can do that too. When it comes to the activity side of things, remember that we can now inspect and create policies based upon activity, where I have a policy here for cloud storage as a whole. Now, the policies in Netskope are really easy to configure. You can see I've only got a couple of variables here. If we jump back, if I cancel out of this, and we want to just create a policy right now, we want web access, category, adult, activities. What type of activities do we want to block on adult websites? We don't want them going to it at all. So therefore, we're going to select all, save, and we want to block. Give it a name, adult content, block, all meaning all users, save, done. Now, any user with a client on the machine is going to be blocked from that type of category. It takes seconds to do a policy. If we go back to our cloud storage block, you can see that I'm only blocking login attempts, but I'm using a custom category. If we go to our web, you can see that cloud storage Granular has got cloud storage as a catch-all. Anything marked as cloud storage is going to be caught by this particular custom category, but we're excluding anything in cloud storage allowed. If we go to cloud storage allowed, we can see that drive.google.com is allowed, and that is the only one. So if we come back to this policy and take a look, we're blocking everything cloud storage, but we're allowing Google Drive based upon this particular category. And we're going to block the login attempts. We're going to block it, and we're going to use this custom template for our notification. If we jump into our notification, we can amend this to say whatever we want. And if possible, because it can't always be done, it's based upon how the website behaves that we're visiting. If possible, redirect the end user to drive.google.com, because that's the one we should be using. So if we want to now see a login attempt, if I go to Dropbox, right, let's do it on Box, because I've got my account in Box. So if I go to Box, it is a cloud storage app. I can visit it. So remember, under the old secure web gateway, it was block or allow. I can now visit this web page. I can go to it. I could download from it. So if a client was to send me a download link for Dropbox, I can still download that content. I just can never attempt to log into it. So if I was using my company details or a personal account, and I had my own instance of Box or a company instance of Box that I shouldn't be logging into, I'm not allowed to, I'm not part of the team that should be using Box, because anyone can sign up for these things. You know, most cloud apps, anyone can create an account on it for free and get some limited usage, but it's a data exfiltration thing. So think of your SASE, that if you, say you've got something on your laptop right now, McAfee, like USB protection. So therefore I cannot plug in a USB stick and I cannot move files to the USB stick unless it's approved in the McAfee client. How do I get data off of my laptop then? I could try and email it to myself, but you've got email protection that will block that content being sent. So it's a confidential really confidential file. It's blocked in email. I can't get it off the USB. I can't share it from the company cloud storage where it's allowed to be, such as OneDrive or Google Drive. How do I steal it? Well, I just log into my own Google Drive and I upload it to that. Because Google Drive's not blocked in our secure web gateway, so therefore I can log into that with any account and I can steal that information. But with something like Netskope, because you can do this extremely granular control of activities and type of user account, like domain of user email when logging into these things. If I was to try and log into Box, so I've got an account called Netskope Demonstration. I'm blocked. So it has detected that I just tried to log into an unsanctioned cloud storage application. And it said, nope, not allowed to do that. And it has sent me to Drive because Drive is allowed within my company. So therefore, I'm allowed to go to Drive. It has sent me automatically to Drive. I'm not allowed to use Box, and that's our granular activity control. But what if we look at an application that doesn't need you to log in? So let's go to WeTransfer. Again, WeTransfer is not blocked. I can visit this website. So if a client was to send me a WeTransfer link, I can still download it. I can access that content. But if I try to send to a client using WeTransfer, let's pick, don't want to use anything that's going to trigger a policy. And it's going to download. So here's a simple text file that just says test in it. And I'm going to try and send that using WeTransfer. So no, I don't need to log in. There is a login option, but I don't have to use this tool. So if I've got a policy that blocks login attempts on cloud storage, I could still use this one. However, I try and do the transfer. And is that doing anything? Since they made it where all these this is an entire web page, it really kills Chrome. But there you can see, I've tried to share it and it is not allowing me to do so. It's saying, nope, you cannot upload to this site. If we come back to our policies, let me get rid of this to get my Chrome back. If we come back to our policies inside of Netskope, I've created one individually for this application. So it knows I'm on WeTransfer and I've blocked share and upload. So this could be the only site that I've blocked for my users. Every other cloud storage app works if I didn't have the other policy, but WeTransfer is a definite no-no, so therefore we block based upon individual application and we block based upon individual activities. Now go back to what I was saying previously about the idea of blocking based upon a value. We can create a constraint. So I could create a constraint called work domain matches at somerfordassociates.com and save that. So I now have a constraint called work domain. If we were to come back to our policies and into real-time protection, and now we go back to our login attempt, I can add a constraint to this. Say that a login attempt, I can't add a constraint for that, but I could create a constraint that said if it was a login attempt and I was not a somerfordassociates.com email being used, then block me. So I can't use my personal instance for login. I can log in if I use my Somerford address, but I cannot log in if I use a Gmail account. You can set up granular policies like that. It has to be done at the application level though, not based upon category, hence why I don't get constraint there, but at the application level you can do that. So we've now got policies created. We've got our users being informed as to any changes. They're being prompted to do the right thing. They're being blocked if need be, but we're not blocking the internet. We're not blocking sites outright. It's very important to think of that because if I block WeTransfer, I've created this WeTransfer block. So a user's on the phone to a client, They say, I want to send you a file, but I can't. It's too big for my email. I've tried to send it over Google Drive. That doesn't work for the client. So they're trying to find a way to get this file to each other. So they go, oh, let's use WeTransfer. That's really handy. They go to WeTransfer. They send that file. It's now lost. It's gone. You don't have control over it. It's out in the wild. You don't know what's happening to that file now. So we block WeTransfer. All that's going to happen is the user and the client are going to say, okay, WeTransfer is blocked as well. What else can we use? Let's use ZippyShare. ZippyShare being one of the most ridiculous cloud sharing apps out there with the information that they steal from you and give to people and so on. So they'll just go to ZippyShare, or they'll go to Box, they'll go to Dropbox, they'll find a way. As long as you're coaching them, as long as you can capture all the ways that they might go to with this cloud storage, for example, and then you set up your information to say you shouldn't be doing this, here's the right way to do it, give them a link to a user guide for how to share a file over Google Drive, say do this instead, it's the only way you're allowed to, and really enforce to them and educate them that this is the correct way to do things. Then you make yourself in a more secure place when it comes to that SASE idea of those data exfiltration points and attack vectors that can happen. Now, we've only got 12 minutes left, so I'm going to very, very quickly jump into two other things. We've got our web traffic secured. Okay, so we're securing that real-time web traffic. Remember, we're in real-time protection here. We're looking at the traffic in flight. We're looking at a malware file being downloaded or uploaded. We're looking at DLP. We're looking at GDPR being downloaded or uploaded. So therefore, we want to be looking at what is our data at rest. So we're using Google Drive. We're using Gmail. If I jump over to my machine, this is my user. And you can see I've got files sitting in my inbox, and this document contains GDPR information. If I look at my drive, I've got a document that contains GDPR. I've got a malware file sitting as well. So how do we protect against this? What do we do when we're using cloud storage like this? If it was on premise, you'd probably have some kind of antivirus or some kind of DLP checking tool with a little agent on a server that would scan files like when they appear and periodically, looking for viruses, looking for DLP, looking for tags and so on. But here we've got it all sitting in a Google account. And more companies are moving towards this cloud software as a service type setup of using OneDrive, Google, even using Dropbox and Box and so on. All of this data is sitting at rest, but it's in the cloud and you can't scan it. You can't go up there and install your antivirus onto their servers. So how do you inspect this? Well, in Netskope, behind the scenes, we've got the API integration. And if I jump out here, for a variety, so this is a limited list of the applications that you can do this with. It is growing, but at the moment, this is a list. I've got this set up for Google Drive, and I've got it set up for Gmail. Inside of Google, I have an API account that I've created for Netskope. It's not an admin account, but it's got certain permissions that it's allowed to look at and perform certain functions inside the Google Drive and inside the Gmail. So inside of here, I've got a couple of policies that I've created where it's going to be scanning Gmail and it's going to be scanning Google Drive for any GDPR information. Now, it doesn't have to be GDPR. There are out-of-the-box policies for PCI information, PII information. You can fully customize your own things you want to look for, like tags and so on, confidential, etc. But we've got it set up for GDPR. If we come back out the way, we can now inspect each of these instances. So here we see Google Drive. It's went through and it's checked all the files, and I've got, this is a variety of files. I've been uploading and downloading quite a bit. And we can see that over time, I've had 7 documents that breach like DLP and so on. I've had, it's recognized malware has existed at least 11 times. And with Gmail, it's been in and it's seen the emails that have existed with DLP violations. We can also set up scans of this. I can set up what's called a retroactive scan, which will go in and it will scan, like I said previously, where you have like a client inside of your company that's sitting on a machine doing virus checking and so on. It will scan and look for these files. It just will not do it in real time, is the point. It is API driven. So while I'm looking at my client and I upload and download malware in here, it is real time because the tenant is inspecting that traffic in real time. When it comes to this in Google Drive, because it's API driven, it's looking for the application to tell Netskope that the file exists. So you can set up a scan to run manually, or you can wait for Google to tell Netskope, Paul has just uploaded a file. Do you want to take a look at it? So you're waiting, it's after the fact when it comes to this. It's not real time, whereas the client is real time. So it's just a small caveat about that to be aware of. Now, the last thing that we want to look at is we want to look at the zero trust network access, or private access as Netskope call it. So back to our diagram, remember our user had to be sitting outside the company and coming in over a VPN. Now, when I previously did this, there was only 2 applications I really went to, filling in a timesheet and doing expenses maybe. There's only a couple of applications. Do I need to have a full VPN license and probably full access to company resources if I only really access 2 applications that are inside the company? Well, no. So in Netskope, we can set up what's called private access. Now, it falls under the zero trust network access. I should only be allowed to go where I'm allowed to go based upon my job, based upon my credentials. I shouldn't have access to everything. Shouldn't be a full admin. It's like a least privileged type approach when it comes to accessing company resources. Because I have this client running on my machine, the client is speaking to the tenant, sending all my traffic there. But what if we could put a little appliance, a little server with an application on it inside of the company 4 walls, or in a AWS instance that would now allow a secure connection between the tenant and that server? Well, we can do that. That server is called a publisher. And if I jump into my back end here, we have a publisher setting at the moment in AWS. Now with this, we can configure our own applications. And I've got a couple set up here. So these are a couple of AWS servers. Remember that we were only looking at web traffic through our client. So if I had an internal application that was a web-based application, I could direct my client to say, if the user ever tries to access this application, send them to the tenant. The publisher then takes that connection from the tenant, and the publisher connects them to that application, even though it's internal. So again, if the VPN was off, they would not be able to access that application. If the client was off, they wouldn't be able to access that application. Same principle. But we don't need the VPN anymore. We only need this Netskope client. We also are able to do it for non-web connections when we do this private application. If I click on this one here, it's port 22. It's not a web application. That's SSH. If I click on DC here, it's 3389. It's RDP. So when we look at my box here, I've got a client running. I have a publisher that's inside the network area that I want to get to, where the boxes I want to go to. And if I was to fire up PuTTY, launch my PuTTY connection to that private app, which is just an IP and just port 22, I get a connection to it. But I'm going through this client up to the tenant, tenant to publisher, publisher to this server here. And if I come back to my Netskope tenant, the back screen, and I go into my activity, this will take a moment to load. I will see my connection through here as to what I did. So it's allowing you, it's like, I think of it as an always on VPN. As long as I've got that client on my machine, publisher, tenant, it's an always on VPN. I don't need a separate license for a VPN that I need to connect to. Then I get to a company resource. As long as there's a publisher setting inside where that resource is and can reach it, then I can get connection. So you can see here, there's in the background as it's loading, there's port 22, 3389. These are all connections that I've done from this machine to a resource, and it's went via Netskope to get there. That's your zero trust network access element. So going back to the start, to summarize all of this, to quickly enable the journey, get the Netskope, get your users in there, get your groups in there, Okta, AD, get the client pushed out, get your existing rules, your secure web gateway rules put into Netskope, and then your users are using the client. They're no longer using the old secure web gateway, get rid of that. Don't need to pay for it anymore. You're using Netskope, and the user's experience is no different because the same rules from your old tool are now in the Netskope. Now layer out what else do you want to do with it. Do you want to be blocking applications? Do you want to be blocking activities? Get those policies built, educate your users, give them the option to proceed rather than instantly blocking, because then you'll just get phone calls, why can't I access this anymore? Definitely get an IT security policy updated as to where data should be stored. Should it be in Drive? Should it be in OneDrive? Where is it not allowed to be sent? Get those protections in place for the data exfiltration points. So how can someone steal data from your company? We'll block them logging into applications using personal accounts, etc. Block them from downloading from risky or uploading to risky cloud storage, and maybe allow the download because clients use it, they have to. And then eventually turn it off once users are well aware it's going to be turned off at a certain date. Look at the private access. It's going to give them access to internal applications and get rid of the VPN that the company have. Get them going through that publisher and integrate with whatever cloud storage that you're using. If Netskope can, remember it's limited on the number that it can do. If we look at them again, we've got OneDrive, full Microsoft suites here. We've got Box, we've got Dropbox, Slack, that's GitHub. Yep, not GitLab. We've got GitHub there. So integrate with these and get your data at rest scanned as well. Because these cloud storage companies, they aren't dedicating the compute power to do antivirus scanning on all the files that you upload to them. So therefore, Netskope will do that. Netskope will actually look at them. One thing it can also do is it can move files out to quarantine. So you can see here I've got a quarantine folder. Any malware that's detected is actually being sent to a quarantine folder. You can be moving the files away from the user. It leaves behind a little tombstone file that tells the user what happened to stop them just uploading it again. But that's it. You've now got a layer of protection for SASE where your web traffic is secure no matter where the user is. Your data exfiltration and your attack vectors for malware, it's now blocked, it's in flight, ain't going to hit your machine. Netskope picks up malware, it's going to be blocked before it even touches a user's machine. And any data that they try and steal or any data they accidentally share out, etc., can be fixed, can be blocked. Then we've got private access, giving them access to any internal applications or servers that they need to get to, and it's securely done. Don't need to be paying for the VPN. All under the same hood, and this, again, is only a small part of what Netskope can actually do. We only touched on the basics.